So today we're talking about the DJI Zenmuse H20 and the tools that it has for inspection work. Today's webinar is not going to be run by me. It's going to be run by one of our sales guys, John Parker. So, hey, John, are you ready over there?
All right, well, thanks everyone for showing up. So today we want to do a little bit about inspection. So inspection is obviously a big deal in the drone world, and it's only getting bigger. And really, the H20 series camera does things that really no other camera has done before. So we sort of want to get into that. We're just really going to scratch the surface, but it's some pretty amazing things that I think this camera has. So so a little bit of an agenda for today is we're going to go over the H20 H20T camera. Last week, I think it was last week, Carrie did one a webinar on the thermal aspect, but in case you weren't here, we'll just touch on that. We're not going to do thermal today, but really sort of focus on utility inspection. And then I want to give just a sort of a quick shout out to our friends at Pix4D for some of the new products they have in this field. We are also a Pix4D dealer. Then we're going to get into the H20 smart inspection and go over the features. And then we went out a couple of times and took some images, and we'll go over those. So here we go. So for those of you who have not yet seen the camera, the H20 or the H20T, it is made for the M300 RTK. It connects via the DJI Skyport, and really the only difference between the two, the H20 and the H20T, is the thermal, which is what the T is for. So actually I learned something that the H is for hybrid, right? So it's got 3 or 4 sensors depending on which camera that we have. And so it's got a wide angle lens, which is, and a zoom lens. So at the same time, you can see a wide angle. It's got, like, I want to say 80-degree diagonal field of view. And then you can zoom in and find your targets. It's very handy for that. And they both have a laser rangefinder. So the wide angle camera, again, so as I mentioned, it does have this wide field of view, right? And it's a 12 megapixel sensor. So it's not a bad little camera in and of itself. But really it's the zoom camera which really makes it here, right? So it's a 23x hybrid optical zoom, and it's a 20 megapixel camera. It's really it can take some really amazing pictures. And then also both cameras have the laser rangefinder as well. But we're mostly going to focus on the wide angle and the zoom camera for the purpose of inspection. So obviously inspection is really a big part of what's going on. My background is not in inspection. My background is in photogrammetry and LiDAR. And so, you know, all of my UAV experience prior to coming here has pretty much just been on a photo mission map or a LiDAR mission map. So I'm probably the least experienced pilot at this organization. But the last place I was at, we primarily focused on LiDAR, but we did do inspection as well. So several aspects of inspection. Is the asset is a big part of it, especially for the utility people. Vegetation encroachment, as if any of you are from California, you know that's a big deal when the transmission or distribution lines spark a fire. It's been a rough year, even in Colorado, not to the extent of California, but it's an important thing. And there's sort of different ways to go about inspecting distribution and transmission. So I have here a picture of a bunch of transmission towers, and I really think sort of some of the key features here really lend itself towards doing transmission inspection. So you get inspection today is still, a lot of it's still done on the ground. You still have people walking around measuring the base of utility poles, And of course, then we've got helicopters have been doing long lines for a long time. And then a lot of that was visual inspection. And UAVs have really sort of come into a nice spot in between the two. So I just want to say a few things quickly about electrical distribution inspection. So a typical inspection includes anywhere from 6 to 8 images. You got a standoff image where you get the entire pole, and then you do an orbit around the top, and that can be 4 to 6 images, and then usually you get a nadir image down from the top. So in the bottom left there, you can see a sort of a nadir image, and I'm not too zoomed in. I was trying to get a lot of images on here, but one of the things you can inspect at that point is the pole rotting from the top, right? That's important. And then on the next image over, where you see that transformer, you can see that it's seeing some wear in the top that you wouldn't necessarily see from the ground. And then there's another challenge with transmission lines, distribution lines, is some of them are in areas where it's hard to fly around. If you look at that picture on the far right, you can see it would be a bit of a trick to do an orbit around the top of that pole. So unfortunately, you can't automate sometimes around poles like that, and you have to have some good flying skills. So transmission inspection is sort of a different animal, and as we all, as you drive around the countryside or the city or wherever, there are all different kinds of transmission towers, right? So this is just an example of some, and some of them are actually quite tall, right? So they present a lot of different challenges. And then the requirements to capture images on these towers can really vary as well. In addition to the tower itself, obviously we want to clear the vegetation around them. But when you're looking for a pattern of shots on some towers, some of them are up to 50 shots per structure, right? And it can be really tricky to, as you're flying manually, to make sure you get all the shots on every tower and get every asset that you're looking for. And this is where, as we'll see coming up here, that the H20 can really offer some assistance to that, right? To automate that, so it's less likely to make human error. So just sort of quickly here, I do want to mention that so Pix4D has created, these are two relatively new products called Pix4D Scan and Pix4D Inspect. So the scan actually it's quite a nice thing for if you're doing these orbits around and utility poles or even cell towers, that you can create a flight path to do it automatically and take pictures at an automatic interval, which is really nice. And then at the back end, they have the Pix4D Inspect, which uses it organizes the images so people can do inspections. It has some ability with artificial intelligence to grade the images, as well as a way to store and distribute the images. And this is an area in the inspection industry that some pretty big players have some big interest in. Intel has a product out there called Insight, and they've got a lot of people, and they're throwing a lot of money at it for this automated inspection via artificial intelligence. And then there's companies like Cognizant are doing it. There's a company, Exelon, which is part of a spinoff from Exelon Power Company out east, is also big into the artificial intelligence. And there's just going to be more players in this. And I think inspection is really an area that's really growing, especially when you got these type of players involved in it. So now on to the feature of the day, and that would be our H20 smart inspection features. And there's really two of them, right? So the first one is the artificial intelligence spot check, or the AI spot check. And that basically, this is what I was talking about, gives you the ability to automate routines, especially for big towers and stuff like that. And there is, as we sort of looked into this, there is an awful lot to unpack about this, right? So, I mean, this AI spot check could be a webinar in and of itself, and just how to go about and do it. And maybe that's going to be something we'll look at the future. Today, we're going to actually go over its features and how you go about this. And then the other main feature is the high-res grid photo. And this basically allows you to frame an area of interest with the wide angle camera, and then the zoom camera will automatically go and collect a set of images. And you do this while you're flying. And this is what we did. We went out a couple of times with the M300. We went around a cell tower here by the office, and then went out on the weekend and found a transmission tower, and we tried it there. So it's a very great feature. It takes a little bit of I'd say work or practice to become proficient at it. So, but we'll go over that here. So going back to the AI spot check, the idea behind that in particular is to go back and have the ability to go back and do repeat inspections, right? So, every transmission tower, you want to inspect it. I don't know, if I'm not a utility guy, but I'd say at least once a year, maybe twice a year, and you want to make sure you're getting the same things every time, because you want to check the progression of the health of the asset, right? And basically, you do that by creating and saving waypoint missions. So, and so the first time through is going to be a little bit arduous, right? Because you actually have to create a waypoint mission. You have to go visit each point. But this is one of the really, I think, powerful things of the H20 and the M300, is that at each point, a waypoint where you're going to stop and take a picture, you can assign camera actions and aircraft actions, right? And so when it revisits that point and flies to it automatically, it will take the same zoom level, the same picture, or it could take a video if you want to set up to take a video. And I think that's particularly really interesting that they've gone out of their way to do that. My hat is off to them. And then sort of the next level of intelligence on this is that when you take a picture of an asset here, right, and then after the flight, after that first time, you actually identify it, and it's saved in the flight controller, so that next time when it's out there flying and pointing towards that that asset, that transformer, that whatever, it actually tries to find it, because when you're out there flying, there's wind and everything, so it may not, the camera may not be pointing perfectly the same way the second time out, even though you have the same mission, but it takes that next step to actually identify the target and then take another picture of it. And I think Carrie had a very interesting question. Is like, and this is something we don't know the answer to yet, is that's a lot of information sitting on your flight controller. So we're not, there's still probably a lot of learning to do about the best way to organize that information, save that information, get it off the controller, back on the controller a year later. But still, I mean, these are sort of very, very, I think, thoughtful things that people have done at DJI to really improve the quality of the inspection. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. So, but anyway, the next really cool thing is the high-res grid photo. So here's the idea: is that you have an asset out there, right? And you want to take a picture of it, and you can see if you can see on here, you can see the grid that's set up over here, right? And in this particular case, it's set up as a 3x3 grid, and then it will take 9 pictures from where it's sitting right now at a high zoom level, or whatever zoom level you set it at, right? So we went out and tried this ourselves, right? And it is really sort of quite interesting the first time you do it, and because there's several factors when that box shows up. Um, it depends on the zoom level you have set for the zoom camera. It depends on how far away you are, and then also you can adjust that. You can see the little arrows here. You can adjust that box in size. So you want to be, you want to get fairly proficient at this if you're gonna use this method, because the entire time you're setting the grid, you're flying, you're burning batteries, right? So the first time you do it, we spent a little bit of time trying to figure it out and adjust the grid and zoom in and zoom out, but you can tell once you sort of get the hang of it, like anything, right? You get much better at it. So actually for what you see here, we actually have got a little video. I'm going to try to switch over to the video here. And so this is actually a video recording of the screen controller. Right? And so you see before I started, I want to point out when we first brought it up, you see the box here? So it just brought up, by the way we were sitting, it just says, okay, I'm just going to do one photo, a 1 by 1. And that was, and then it took it, and then, yeah, great, view results, 1 photo. That's not what we wanted. So we tried again here. And so you can see, and actually, you can see we're adjusting the box. We're trying to get a fit. And we're trying to get, in this case, we were trying to get the whole tower, it's a cell tower. And it just took, and then we finally said, okay, and off we go. So basically, the way you get to the grid is pretty simple. You just go over to the camera menu, and then when there's options for, video, single photos, and under single photos, there's high res grid, and you just tap that. So it goes through and takes all these pictures. I'm just going to let this run. This video is not going to go too long. But at this point, you're just sitting there watching the aircraft do its thing. And so, okay, I'm going to pause it here. Oh, go back 10 seconds. Because I didn't record this, but I do want to talk about this real quickly. So, where you see it took 24 photos, and then underneath where it says view results, it'll pop the grid up. And then you can just tap on each photo to see if what's in each photo is what you want. So if you were actually trying to center some particular item in a grid, you could tell before you got back to the office, but the flip side is you don't necessarily want to spend flight battery time reviewing all your photos real time. So it's a give and take. So as you get more proficient at it, you can see. And I think as I let this roll up just a little more, and this is also a good view of the controller, right? So down here in the corner, you see the FPV view, right? And then the map view, and you can just switch views just by tapping on them as well. And I don't think I'm going to let this video roll anymore. And here you can only see the gimbal. And now we started another collection. So, all right, so I'm going to pop out of this video. I know it's pretty exciting, but hey. So I can go back over to, so here we are. All right, and so every time it takes a photo, right, in the case, so the camera we were using happened to be a thermal camera, so it happened to have a thermal sensor. So every image it takes a photo, and I'm going to put this into a little bit of a slideshow here for you. So here's the wide angle. Next one's going to be the zoom. So we didn't really zoom that much. This is what we're just learning here. And then here's the thermal of the same shot. And then so the wide angle looks pretty much the same for the next shot, right? And then we're zoomed in. You can just tell we're moved a little bit more. And then once again the thermal. So if you have the thermal, particularly if you're doing transmission tower inspection, you do get the thermal right at the same time. And as one of the images that rolls up here, I think once we get to the top of the tower, I think it really shows a nice example of it. It's a little bit hotter up there. I know it's a pretty exciting video, isn't it, guys? Okay, well, so I think you get the idea here. I'm gonna pop out of this. Actually, I might jump ahead to there. I want you can see some hot spots up there. But let's jump to, so after we sort of tried this around the office, we decided to go out and find some transmission towers, right? Now, so I'd like to point out on this particular day that we went out, it was last Sunday, I have never come close to flying a drone in the amount of wind that we were in this day. And I was pretty amazed at how well the M300 handled itself in the wind. It was, we were actually going to go do some nearby stockpiles later, but we actually couldn't fly those because it was so dusty and windy that we literally couldn't see the stockpiles through the dust. But again, I want to run through this here. So you can, and you'll see there's going to be some samples here of the grid. So we're trying to get, down low and up high. And then, so what happens in this case, in our sort of inexperience of using this really awesome new feature, is I have some great shots of the grass coming up that, but it still worked out pretty well. And I just think, and also in terms of safety, you can sort of offset yourself away from the lines, to one side or the other, and still get great shots. My artistry here is probably not the best yet. So I am, like I said, I'm probably the least experienced or worst manual pilot at the place, but I actually got pretty comfortable using this feature. I would like to have stayed out longer. I'd like to have been out on a better day, obviously. And then the other thing about doing these shots, I mean, if you going back to the Pix4D angle, right, is of being able to build 3D models of these structures, which I think is, it really takes it to the next level beyond just doing a photo inspection. And in particular on some of the more complex towers like cell towers, right? That is the ability to sort of have that 3D model and to circle around and look at it from different angles. I think for the inspection guys is a really huge benefit. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming forward. Now, the other part of it, though, is obviously speed, right? So the people take these images and they want to take them, they want to look at them like right away. they want to identify those high-risk areas, or areas that need some sort of vegetation mitigation or equipment replacement. They want to get that taken care of as quickly as possible. So, and that is, I know this is not one of our longer webinars, but it is pretty much the crux of it. We've got, I would like to thank at this point my colleague Aaron for coming out with me on a Sunday, giving up some time. And so we decided to do a good picture of ourselves on the way to land in, which is sort of illustrates it maybe a little easier than with the towers. So this is a 3x3 of a couple of not so great looking guys, maybe, or one good looking guy and me. So that's pretty much the what I wanted to cover today. I don't care. Do we have any questions?
We do not have any questions at the moment.
All right.
Got a quiet audience today.
Okay.
Did this help explain to everybody these features? Because there's a handful of videos out there that kind of show the feature, but not really much in the way of how does it actually work and how do you use it. So it's always good to kind of see and hear from somebody's experience as to how they work. So, you know, we've talked, I mean, you and I haven't talked about this, John, but, you know, in looking at these couple features like this, what was the learning curve and actually kind of getting the hang of it?
Yeah, well, okay, so I can relate it to my level of experience, and I'll speak a little bit for Aaron, right? So Aaron, who has a lot more stick time than I do, was just really more had a lot more dexterity about it. And when I was doing it with him the difference between doing it by myself and having him sort of next to me, guiding me, even though he'd never done it before, it really made a big difference. You know, it's just one of those things, you know, so I've only done it now twice, but now if I go out and do it the third time, I'm talking about the high res photos, I now think I have the hang of it, right? It's you just have to try it at different distances, different zoom levels. There's a little bit of pressure when you're trying to learn things, as I said, while you're flying, right? Because you can't really do this on the ground. I guess we could set it up in the office and do it that way, but that's not fun. It's more fun to do it in the air.
Yeah, but I was actually going to ask, do you think it would benefit people to actually do it on the bench and at least go through it once or twice so that they kind of see how you manipulate the grid, how you set the different levels of it, the number of images, and then that way you're not just burning a lot of battery. I mean, because you do burn a lot of battery when you're setting up some of these things.
Oh yeah, I think that actually be really good. You know, I guess you know, and you know, particularly that first time when we just went out to our parking lot and did the tower, you know, he's just like, you just want to go do it, right? You know, you go, it can't be that hard, right? But I think there is a lot of value, especially in learning how to set up the grid. And the screen is a little touchy, right? And we were, at least me, you know, you fat fingered a few times, right? And I think there's a couple of times when when we were trying to. So this is not all of what we did by far. So if you're too far away on the grid, on the wide angle zoom, it's kind of hard to set up the grid. And this is let me go back to a shot. If I can go back to.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll answer this question from Robin. He says, do you know of any utilities that are using this configuration to do everyday inspections? Most are extremely specific in the cameras they use and are currently focused on the X5S and or X7. And yes, Robin, actually the answer is yes, I do know of some because we've sold product to them, as well as we've sold this to companies that do the inspections for the utility companies. So while it isn't as prevalent yet, because it really is kind of still a new machine, not everyone has seen the output from it. I think the adoption rate is going to start climbing very quickly because the quality of the images is fantastic. Now, if we look at the Z30, which was a very popular camera for doing inspection work, I mean, sure, that was a 30 times optical zoom, but it was a 30 times optical zoom on a 2 megapixel camera. And the resulting images were great because you could zoom in optically 30 times, but now we have a 24 times zoom on a 20 megapixel camera. So the resolution difference and detail difference between the Z30 and the H20, I mean, it doesn't even begin to be comparable when, even at maximum zoom, you're still going between a 2 megapixel image and a 20 megapixel image. So what you can get out of the H20 compared to the Z30 is night and day difference. I mean, they're not even on the same scale. And then you have the wide angle, which gives you even more field of view than the Z30 was capable of doing. You kind of would have had to put you'd have to be running an X5S with like a 12 millimeter lens on it to, if I'm doing my math correctly here in my head, to get the same type of field of view. So you'd really have to have the X5S and a Z30, and you still aren't really getting the same level as you are with the H20 because that zoom camera having a 20 megapixel camera on it. And if you need thermal, well, then the H20T just puts it all together into a really nice package, all in one integrated system. The other side to all this is, and it's not really talked about too much, the laser rangefinder. Because if you're trying to do power line or, like the tower that's shown in the image there, or cell towers or something, and you're trying to be as consistent as possible in your distance from the subject, you can use the laser rangefinder and really get that super accurate distance every single time instead of just kind of guessing at your distance to something. So it can help you with your accuracy, your consistency, and the level of detail that's possible. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. So I was wanting to bring up this picture as an example because I grabbed it. It's a screen grab off of one of the videos that DJI put out about this feature, and I would just, my first comment would be is that having the area of interest being that small in your wide angle camera view is at least for the novice user is a little tricky to set that grid up and get it centered just like that, just the way you want it. I mean, my recommendation would be, I was far out like this a couple of times, and of course immediately just brings up a great big grid, and so my recommendation would be at least to get a little bit closer just for the framing, right? That is one of the things I learned, and then not to have fat fingers, but that would help too. But anyway, that's just one of the things I think I learned, and just it's a little tricky to set up the grid that first time, but back to the point of doing it on the bench would be probably really smart. Yeah.
Now, this particular image I always thought was kind of strange because that's a long way away from that
It
tower.
is.
I
Yeah.
mean, why? I just don't understand why you would want that level of distance if you're trying to do any type of inspection work on that thing. Just
Yeah,
even with the zoom. I mean, the
well, I
zoom's
think
great.
they were trying to show off the zoom, is my guess, right? Um, and if you roll the video, I mean, assuming it's from the same shots, which you don't know, it's because it's promotional video, uh, but yeah, I would. That is awful far. That is awfully far away, and that actually makes it more difficult to set the frame up. So,
Yeah, it just seems like an odd distance from something.
yeah.
Okay, now the other feature, and you and I just started talking about this before we started the webinar, is when it's not this feature, it's what's the other one called, the smart
Well,
inspection or
the spot check.
spot check, that allows you to save that mission. This seems like a pretty odd thing to be able to save, because how often are you going back to the same exact location to inspect the same thing and storing hundreds if not thousands of locations? Seems like a really awkward thing to try and do. So I think that's going to take some more playing around with to really get a feel for how that's going to work. Because if you're, doing cell towers out in the middle of Kansas, they're all going to look the same. So you can't really like recognize one from the other. And you'd have to have a naming convention that would work. And if you're only going out every 2 years, does it even make sense to record those so that you can go back a year or 2 years later and redo it? I'm just not quite
Yeah.
sure of how efficient that process is at that point.
Yeah, it's just there's going to be thousands of missions in between repeats. So, yeah, how do you keep track? That's an unknown at this point, obviously.
Yeah. So for the people who are still on here, and Robin, because this was a really good question about is anyone using this? If you would like the sample images and stuff that John did, reach out to him. It's jparker@multicopterwarehouse.com, or A Woods, Aaron, A Woods at multicopterwarehouse.com, or just enterprise@multicopterwarehouse.com. And we can share this stuff with you so that you can look at basically what we think are real world scenarios, not marketing fluff that who knows, how many times they tried to get it right. This is a guy going out and doing it and getting his experience. And so you can see, it's like, this is really what you can expect from this camera. So if that helps you sell work, or, at least see if there's the interest in that type of imagery before you invest in buying the equipment, I think that's a great option for you, is to actually get some data from us so you can see what it's like. Can the sensors on the M300 keep the aircraft off the line? I mean, technically they can if the lighting is right. So it's going to be tricky. For best results, an object really needs to be about 3 inches and lined up pretty well. The larger it goes from there, the better it is. So it's going to be interesting to see just how well it works. Of course, that's not something we've tested with our demo unit.
I stay away from the wires.
I'm not sure that's going to take a little more testing when we can get really up close to something and do some safe testing on that. So is it a safe thing to trust the AI to do? I don't think anything is a safe thing to trust AI to do. Now, also, if you haven't seen it today, there is a new photogrammetry camera, the P1, and a new LiDAR system called the L1 that were both announced today from DJI. And you can go to DJI's website and you can look at these two. The P1 is a 45 megapixel full frame camera. that has some really cool features for photogrammetry, really a game changer for that type of work. And they have another LiDAR package that not only has the LiDAR sensor, it also has an RGB camera, a 20 megapixel, 1-inch sensor. So you can do live color LiDAR stuff. It's really exciting what they announced today. Now, don't ask us about pricing. We don't know the pricing, but we do know that they're going to be expected in the January to March timeframe, so Q1 of next year. So we got a couple months before those come out. As we get more information on those and we get pricing info, we'll do a webinar to let everyone really get in depth on the L1 and the P1. So look for an announcement of a webinar at some point between now and January, I would say, as we get more information. We only have the information that was posted on DJI's website. We don't have anything above that. So asking us isn't really going to do much good. We're just going to be reading off DJI's website for right now. So unfortunately, I wish we had more information, but I think that new LiDAR and the new P1 camera are really going to be interesting products.
Yeah, you can just call us just to gauge our excitement. That would be fine too.
We're very excited about those. Very, very. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time, John, to put this together and, go out and get some stick time on the 300. It's a great machine. I love flying it every chance I get.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody.